Are professional sports teams going to go public? This is a question that is receiving a lot more attention after Red Bull Acquisition Corporation announced that they are working with Fenway Sports Group to potentially take the company public. Now, this raises a lot of different ideas. One is that there's going to be emotionally invested people like myself who happen to be Red Sox fans who are going to buy shares if something happens. And similarly, you can't just buy on emotion. Like I know in this case, I definitely bought on emotion. I'm going to be 100% on that. But at the same time, to buy a big stake in something like this is just a very minuscule stake that I decided to invest in this SPAC, hoping that, it'll turn into Fenway Sports Group. But you have to look at numbers instead of just solely being an emotional investor. So I see a lot of sports teams, if this goes through and you see Fenway Sports Group goes public, you have a lot of sports teams that they have lost a lot of revenue and they are in the red and they have to raise money. And part of raising that money could be initial public offerings, whether it's the traditional route or through SPACs like Red Bull, which among other people on the team features Billy Beane. So there is a really good, decent chance that this goes through. So let's run through some numbers because while a lot of teams aren't publicly traded, some of them are owned by companies that are publicly traded. So if you look at the Atlanta Braves, those revenue numbers get disclosed because they are part of a public entity. So just some lead up because obviously we're in the age of the lockdown, which has had a significantly negative impact on MLB's revenue. Beforehand, they had record-breaking revenue years. So 2018 to 2019, they had a roughly 4% increase in total revenue, where they got to $10.7 billion. This was a record for them, and it was something they were looking to build up, and then obviously things happened, and that's not the case anymore. So you could look at it and say before everything that happened, MLB was on a growth path. Now, not on the growth path of something like a Shopify or an Amazon or anything like that. Like if you invest just based on that growth rate of just around 4% per year, you are looking at a more mature company. I mean, there are some ways that MLB can expand and sports teams in general, because Fenway Sports Groups, it's not just the Boston Red Sox, it's also a sports marketing agency, it's also Nesson, it's also Liverpool. So there are some other assets in there as well. But if you look at MLB, and I'm just using this because I know about the Braves since they're part of a publicly traded company, revenue for them went down 95% because of everything that is going on. If you look at it from a quarter to quarter breakdown based on what happened in a recent quarter in 2020 versus the same time frame in 2019. So if you are going to invest in sports teams, which based on the rumblings that are going on right now, it's not far-fetched to see more sports organizations go public. I mean, the Green Bay Packers, they literally have a stock that they just keep selling like crazy when they offer it, even though it's not really tradable. It's more of one of those pride things to have the stock, to have some type of claim into the team versus just like a traditional stock where it's not a sports team. Maybe you love the company because you work there, you know someone who worked there, or something else like that. But some of these sports organizations, they have a lot of clout and people will want to say that they have a share. So that's kind of similar to why I decided to invest in this SPAC, knowing full well that just because they're in talks doesn't necessarily mean that it is a guaranteed deal. But it is interesting to see these talks emerge. Now, if you do look at the business model of baseball, though, you do have the 95% drop in revenue from the Atlanta Braves. Now, maybe they picked up a little bit, but, it's definitely decimated in terms of what it looked like last year. Some things you have to keep in mind is that in a baseball stadium with tens of thousands of people tightly squeezed together, it's not going to be something that everyone wants to rush back into, but it is a sport that continues to have a lot of viewership. So maybe within a few years, it does return back to 2019 levels. So some people may see this as a value play. It is a little hard to judge like what is a value play if you don't have all of the numbers in front of you, because since these sports are private companies, a lot of them, they don't have to go as deep with the financial income statements and releasing all of that as you would if you are a publicly traded company. That's why that you can look at a baseball team like the Atlanta Braves, which happens to be owned by a publicly traded company. So that type of information would have to get disclosed. But this is definitely a really interesting SPAC because it just shows a future path where you can see a lot of sports organizations offering some of their shares in the stock market and giving investors the ability to invest in some of their favorite teams. In any event, I would love to know what you guys think in the comments. Are you going to buy this SPAC? Do you think that more SPACs like this, or just even traditional IPOs, are coming up in the future? I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments, and look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.